Hello everyone, welcome to Coffee Cup Enlightenment. Today's video is going to be on You Are Untouchable. And before I go into today's video, the first thing I want to talk about is sort of like motivational Facebook memes that give instructions and directions on how to live a more peaceful life. And some of these memes are like we need to learn to let go. We need to learn to surrender. It's only till we surrender that we can be at peace, and all these sorts of things. But these sort of memes are very good for the initial stages of sort of getting direction and insight to where disturbances come from, and letting go, surrendering, accepting, and all these sorts of things are very useful tools in the initial stages of reducing the disturbances in your life and becoming more at peace. And and they're also really good for I'll put these aside for now. They're also very good for in the initial stages when you're, say this represents the story of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and this is your awareness here that's looking at the story of you. I don't know if that's going to hold there, that's probably not going to hold there, but that's looking at the story of you, and here is your awareness. And when your awareness is not recognized as you yet, and the story of you is your predominant experience of who you think you are, then being this story and doing the actions of surrendering, accepting and letting go can help undo the story of itself and help generate peace. But what I'm going to talk about in this video is probably a little bit less uncommon. You might not hear it in this probably perspective as much in anywhere else, but it comes from the perspective that this awareness is because it doesn't consist of a story, it is the witness and the awareness of the story, and ultimately it is the story that first of all it produces a judgment, so we'll call that the judgment there. And then through its own judgment, it then produces a disturbance. And the awareness is looking at both of these processes happening. So it's looking at, number one, even though it might not recognize, awareness might not recognize itself as awareness, the awareness is always looking. There's always something looking in the background. Without something awareness in the background, none of this story could even take place. So that sort of represents a bit of a pondering and meditation to how important you are. There's something that represents the lights on in the world. It's the lights on switch, and that is you, awareness. It's sort of like in the Zen sort of statement, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it actually fall, or something like that. And it sort of points to that without awareness, the entire manifested world does not exist. It needs an observer of the manifested in order for the manifested to exist. It doesn't go the other way around. The manifested does not exist without the awareness. And so the awareness is watching, number one, it's watching the story of who it thinks it is. It's all the, and this story is never-endingly changing. It's been updated every week with new different versions, good, bad and ugly, right and wrong. And the awareness is watching this. It's watching its judgments. The story is making the judgments, not the awareness. And then it watches the disturbance created, which it is the conditioned self that's having the experience of the disturbance, not you. And this perspective, it pretty much represents, probably you can say, the last grades to graduation, because if you have if you start with the presumption that who you are is subject to any form of disturbance whatsoever, then you it means there's identification with the conditioned self, and you won't sort of be able to invite some possibility that who you are as just awareness itself is undisturbable. Awareness is actually watching disturbance, but it itself is not disturbed. It's watching the judgments that comes. So then when you go back to these memes, I need to surrender, I need to accept, I need to let go. What would be more accurate when we start to look at this perspective is that it is it's the story of who you think you are, which consists of a bundle of thoughts. It is the one that's producing the judgments, and who needs to let go? Well, I guess in this perspective, no one really needs to let go. There's no one even needs to surrender. All you need to see is the process of what's going on here. Is that the judgment that was created from the self, through its individualistic perception of its own self, it produces judgments that seems valid to its own reality, and then it creates a disturbance based on that judgment, and then it is having the disturbance. So really, if you can see it from this perspective, there is no surrendering needed. There is no letting go needed. There is no anything needed. All you're doing is just being a silent witness. And through this perspective, nothing is done, nothing is needed to be done, and nothing was ever needed to be undone even, because all of this isn't new. It's pretty much, this represents, like I said before, it's the last stages of sifting yourself from identification, and it's bringing about the realization that who you actually are in this awareness is untouchable. And another reason why it's untouchable, it's because it doesn't consist of anything. The awareness is looking at the 10-year-old story of who you think you are, and then it's looking at the 15-year-old story of who you think you are, and all its corresponding disturbances. And I should say, like, as the 10-year-old, it produces particular judgments that the 20-year-old wouldn't do, and it also produces particular disturbances that the 20-year-old wouldn't do. So as this self continually gets upgraded each day with new concepts and new ideas, old judgments disappear, old disturbances disappear, and new judgments come in place to replace the old judgments, and new disturbances come in place. And but all of this is watched, this entire process. And and then you might go to the 30-year-old conditioned self, and then the 30-year-old conditioned self has particular judgments and has particular disturbances, and this 30-year-old self might look at the look back at the 10-year-old, it'll look back at the 10-year-old's conditioned self, and laugh at some of the things that it used to become disturbed over. It doesn't have those disturbances anymore. So this sort of, gives a perspective of the non-validity of the disturbance being anything to do with who you are. It's always, these selves are always changing over the years. You've got the 10-year-old self, the 20-year-old self, the 30-year-old self, and they're all being upgraded, and when you get to the 30-year-old one, these ones disappear, and then you think that this is you, and then the 40-year-old self comes along and says, no, this is me and this one's not me. And all along the awareness is watching this charade, this game happening, and it's convinced that, no, hang on, I'm the 40-year-old self, and then all of a sudden the 50-year-old self comes, and you say, no, this is who I am, and the awareness still is not recognizing itself as this, as just awareness. So then you become the 50-year-old self, and then it has its judgments, it has its disturbances, and round the Buddha wheel it goes, continually creating new versions of itself, creating new styles of judgments for itself that resonate with its character. And the awareness is still watching this, but still is not recognizing itself as this. And it's creating new styles of disturbances which are different than, say, the 10-year-old. Now we're at 50-year-old. And so usually age does naturally bring about this awareness. You start to see that the things that used to make this self cry when it was 10 years old now the same situations bring about laughter. And the reason why is because those judgments to that situation can no longer be used anymore. They're no longer valid. And so you can say this, this self is going through some processes, but it's not really developing or maturing. There's no development or maturing. It's all it's doing is sort of explaining other videos I've done before. It's only trying to, each representation of this self is kind of like represents a pie. So it represents a pie to bring about awareness. So there's pieces of pie in this awareness that aren't recognized. So each time one of these conditioned selves is recognized as not valid and it disappears, it's replaced with more awareness. Then you've got this part of a conditioned self. It gets recognized as just a bunch of thoughts, and then that gets replaced with more awareness. And then what's left is eventually you look at the last piece of conditioned self and you say, I'm not even that. And then that brings about self-realization of yourself as just awareness. And awareness does not consist of any content. It is the witness of content. It's looking at content. So and in that aspect, it's infinite because it's subject to the content, which are then subject to limitations, and it's also eternal because it doesn't exist in time either. And yeah, I think I've pretty much brought up all the points. So yeah, pretty much who we are is untouchable, and and it sort of brings also to the 200 years of psychology. It comes on the antithesis somewhat that not necessarily in all cases, but in somewhat there's some references that who we are is actually damaged and needs to be healed and needs to be repaired. But this is actually the story and its history and its past and all its thoughts that it consists of that is damaged and is disturbed. So, but the awareness is incapable of being disturbed. It is the witness of the disturbance, and we don't experience disturbance ever. We see it in our field of vision, but the awareness itself is never disturbed. It is the witness of it. And you can even get to a point where, once this starts being realized, you can even go deliberately into disturbance. I'll do that with just this thing here, and let the two come face to face. Am I really capable of being disturbed? And when this awareness sort of comes up to the disturbance with a bit of a smiling face, and looks at the disturbance and all its the way it's sort of vibrating and shaking, and looks at it carefully, but it starts to recognize that it's actually just smiling and still. And then that represents even more awareness to bring about of who you are. Pretty much, disturbance represents the last aspect of self-realization. When you face the so-called greatest obstacle, which it's not, and see that it's just a buzzing sensation in your field of vision and nothing more, and it's not personal. It was only this thing here that it was personal to. then you'll see that you'll transcend disturbance, and then you realize that you are you are untouchable. So this can be something to be played with whenever there's a comfortableness within yourself, and a realization within yourself that you are this awareness. You can gradually and sometimes occasionally come to this disturbance and dip your head in it with a smile, and then see that I'm not touched or affected by this. I'm just going to pause it a bit. So getting back to sort of psychology, the world of psychology, what psychology tends to do, it's looking at the negative self-esteem, which consists of all this. It's quite disturbed, and what it's trying to do is in psychology is swap the negative self-esteem and replace it with the positive self-esteem. But all along, the awareness is still looking at so the esteem represents the conditioned self. It's a bunch of thoughts and images that sort of sits in our vision of who we think we are, and it's sort of speaking for us the majority of our life. And this only changes when we recognize we're the witness of this condition. We're looking at it. We're looking at this conditioned self, and we are not it. We are looking at it. What else did I want to talk about? So yeah, any sort of counselling that sort of tries to work on the positive, turn a negative self-esteem into a positive self-esteem, you might say that's maybe good value for your dollars, but ultimately it won't bring about realization of who you truly are, which is awareness. And even and it will be continual process of even the positive self-esteem eventually undergoing process where it's continually affected and disturbed, and then coming up with methods on how to deal with those disturbances and how to fix things and heal things even more. And it's a never ending. What I'm talking about in this video is the end of everything. It's the end of disturbances and the end of fixing or needing to be fixed, because there's nothing to be fixed. The awareness itself was already here. It's not subject to be disturbed. It is the witness of disturbance. It has nothing to do with being good, bad, or ugly, or whatever. And it is the witness of that. And that's, I don't know, that's true freedom. There's nothing to do. You already are who you are. Thank you.